Hello, I'm Davina of sheepandstitch.com, and today we're going to learn how to knit garter stitch 2 ways. Alright, so when you're knitting on 2 needles like this, garter stitch could not be easier. Garter stitch just involves knitting all of your stitches and all of your rows, just like this. So right now I'm just knitting into my stitches. And basically you would just keep going like this to the very end of the row, and then you would turn your work around and you would do it all over again. You would knit those rows as well. So garter stitch on 2 needles, again, is just knitting all of your stitches and all of your rows. Pretty easy. So once you get to the end of your row, you would just turn over and continue knitting. So you can see that garter stitch is made up of 1 row of knits and 1 row of purls, and this gives you a really stretchy fabric, both lengthwise and widthwise. And so if you continue on in this way, you can basically knit yourself a little scarf, right? You can knit yourself a long rectangle, which, you know, is also commonly known as a scarf. So that's a great first project for you to try and tackle. It's really satisfying and it gives you this really awesome, stretchy, cushy fabric. Pretty cool, right? All right, so let's talk about the second way that you can knit garter stitch. Now the second way involves knitting garter stitch on circular needles. So these are circular needles. They basically allow you to knit fabric that is circular. So you look at this fabric I've got here, it's basically a big circle, and that's great for, you know, hats or scarves, or not scarves, hats or socks or sweaters. Basically anything that needs to be knit circularly, you would use circular needles. Now the difference with circular needles is that you're always knitting on the front side of your fabric, right? You would never actually turn your work around. So when you're knitting garter stitch on circular needles, you would basically knit 1 row and purl the next row, and you would repeat these 2 rows. So when do you know when to purl and when to knit? Well, it's actually pretty easy. So here you can see on my left needle, I've got purl stitches. So rather than purl these purl stitches, I'm actually going to knit them. So that's pretty much the secret to garter stitch in the round. When you have a purl stitch, you would knit into it. So here we go, I've got purl stitches, so I'm going to knit into those purl stitches. Alright, and I'm almost at the end of my row here, so at the end of my purl row, and I can tell because I've got this little stitch marker, and this marks the beginning and end of my row. So rather than actually turning my work around and, you know, knitting back this way, which is what we do on flat needles, I would just keep going in the round. So I'm going to take my stitch marker over, and now you can see that I have a new round, and these are all knit stitches right here. So when I've got knit stitches, I'm going to purl into them. And remember, that's because garter stitch is 1 row of purls and 1 row of knits. So I've got knits here, and I'm going to purl into them. All right, and that's how you knit garter stitch in the round. So just to recap, in the round, you would be knitting 1 row and purling the next row. And if you're confused about when to purl and when to knit, you would knit into your purl stitches and purl into your knit stitches, which is exactly what I'm doing right now. I've got a knit stitch and I'm going to purl into it. All right, so there you have it. When you have garter stitch on 2 needles like this, you would knit all of your rows. All right, so there you have it, garter stitch 2 ways. Now, if you enjoyed this video, then please like it and subscribe right here for more knitting and pattern tutorials. Okay, that's it for me. I'm Davina of sheepandstitch.com, and I'll catch you next time with another knitting video.